They told me it was an adults-only family trip. They said I needed a break. What they didn't say was that my children weren't invited, but my sisters were. I stood at the airport with my suitcase in one hand and heartbreak in the other. In just a few minutes, I would make a decision that would change everything: my family, my future, and most importantly, myself. This isn't just a story about a vacation gone wrong. It's about betrayal, awakening, and finding the courage to walk away, even when it's your own parents you're walking away from. My name is Jessica. I'm 35 years old, a mother of 2 amazing little humans, and someone who, for most of her life, tried to be the good daughter, the peacemaker, the one who smiled through the tension, brushed off the comments, and did everything she could to be seen. So when my parents planned a family getaway and insisted it would be just for the adults, a chance to reconnect, they said, I hesitated. I love my kids. I love being a mom. But after years of single parenting, late-night feedings, and being everything for everyone, maybe, just maybe, a little break wouldn't hurt. Jessica, you deserve this, Mom had told me over the phone, her voice soft but certain. Claire won't bring her kids either. Just us grown-ups. For once. So I said yes. I stocked the fridge, typed out a 3-page instruction list for my best friend Sarah, who agreed to babysit, kissed my children's foreheads as they slept, and whispered promises of souvenirs and stories when I got back. As I stepped into the airport that morning, I reminded myself, you're not just Mom today. You're Jessica again. I wanted to believe that. But all of that shattered the moment I saw Claire, my sister, walking toward me, dragging 3 little suitcases behind her and trying to wrangle her kids, who were laughing and bouncing around like tiny tornadoes. Froze. Mom waved at me like nothing was out of place. Dad gave me a cheerful smile. And Claire? She shrugged, as if this was the most natural thing in the world. Wait, I whispered, my stomach tightening. I thought this trip was adults only. Mom chuckled. Oh honey, don't make a fuss. Claire's kids are different. You know that. Different. I looked down at the empty space where my own children should have been standing. And then, Mom said it. The sentence that would tear everything apart. We just love them more. And that was the beginning of the end. There's something strange about airports. They hold both the thrill of something new and the ache of what you're leaving behind. I remember standing at the departure gate that morning, coffee in hand, suitcase by my side. People bustled around me. Families hugging, couples whispering plans, the usual blur of pre-flight excitement. And yet, inside me was silence. Not peace, not joy. Just a strange, hollow stillness. I should have been excited. After all, my parents had planned this adults-only family trip for months. They'd pitched it as a chance to reconnect. No noisy kids, no stress, just grown-up time together like old times. Almost said no. I'm a mom. And like most mothers, I carry a silent guilt anytime I choose myself over my children. But Mom's voice echoed in my head. Jessica, you need this. The kids will be fine. Let someone take care of you for once. So I agreed. I booked the flight. I wrote out pages of instructions for my best friend Sarah, who graciously agreed to stay with the kids. I labeled every container in the fridge, FaceTimed the little ones twice before I left, and kissed their sleepy cheeks like I was going away for a year. And for a fleeting moment I believed it. Believed I deserved a break. I believed this trip was something for me. Looking back now, it wasn't the break that was the problem. It was the lie. And the fact that I didn't see it coming. You see, one of the hardest things about being the responsible one in a family is that people often assume you don't need support. They say things like, you've got this, or you're so strong, and they forget that even strong people need space to breathe. That morning, I stood at the gate hoping this trip would give me that breath. Instead, it knocked the wind out of me. Because in just a few minutes, everything I thought I knew about my family, about fairness, about love, would shift. Not with a fight. Not with a dramatic scene. But with one sentence. One decision. And it all started when I saw who else had come on this adults-only trip. What happened next felt like a slap in the face. Because walking toward me wasn't just my sister Claire. She wasn't alone. And the moment I saw the little backpacks swinging behind her, my heart sank. They had lied to me. And I was about to find out just how deep that betrayal ran. First, I thought I was imagining it. Claire was waving at me, all smiles, as she strolled toward the gate in her usual confident way. But it wasn't her that made my breath hitch. It was the 3 little tornadoes bouncing along behind her, her kids. Tiny sneakers squeaked against the polished airport floor. Little backpacks swung wildly on small shoulders. One of them dropped a snack bag, and another squealed with excitement at the sight of an airplane through the window. My heart dropped. I stood there frozen, blinking, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. This was supposed to be an adults-only trip. That was the rule. That was the reason I'd left my own children at home, even though it broke me to do so. Claire brought her kids. I whispered, more to myself than to anyone else. My mom spotted me then and waved, her voice casual as if nothing was wrong. "Oh, Jessica, don't look so surprised," she said, brushing it off like I'd asked about the weather. Dad chuckled beside her. "It's different with Claire's kids. They're no trouble at all. No trouble." The words echoed like thunder in my ears. At that exact moment, Claire's youngest, Max, decided the airport bench was a jungle gym. He climbed on top, laughed loudly, and prepared to jump off. "No trouble," I repeated under my breath, watching the chaos unfold. Claire must have noticed the disbelief on my face because she smiled and shrugged. "Relax, Jess. My kids are angels. You won't even notice them." And then came the sentence. The one I'll never forget. The one that cracked something deep inside me. Mom looked me straight in the eyes and said it so casually, like she was complimenting the weather. "We just love them more." Blink. At first, I thought I'd misheard her. Surely she didn't just say that. But she smiled again like it was the most natural truth in the world. That moment, it wasn't just betrayal. It was confirmation. All the quiet doubts I'd carried over the years. All the little slights I had brushed off. All the times my kids received smaller gifts, less attention, fewer hugs. Suddenly it all made sense. It hadn't been in my head. It had been real all along. It's a painful thing, realizing that love in your family might come with conditions. That affection might be measured out unevenly, not based on who you are, but on who they favor. And what hurt the most wasn't that they loved Claire's kids. It's that mine weren't even worth a plane ticket. Here's the truth I wish I'd learned sooner. Being strong doesn't mean staying silent when you're being treated unfairly. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is say, "This isn't okay." And as I stood there, staring at my family who had made their choice without even thinking twice, I knew I had a choice too. That day at that gate, I didn't just realize they'd lied about the trip. I realized something much deeper, something that had always been there beneath the surface. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a pattern. And for the first time in my life, I couldn't ignore it anymore. I don't know what hit harder, my mother's words or the calm, matter-of-fact way she said them. "We just love them more." It echoed in my mind like a cruel lullaby. And the worst part, it wasn't even surprising. I'd spent years brushing off that gnawing feeling, that no matter how hard I tried, I would never be enough in their eyes. Not as a daughter, not as a sister, and now not even as a mother. But standing at that airport gate, I couldn't deny it anymore. This wasn't a one-time mistake. It wasn't a slip of the tongue or a misunderstanding. It was a pattern, a truth I'd tried so hard not to see. My thoughts spiraled, drawing up memories I had long buried. Christmas 5 years ago, when Claire's kids got shiny new bikes and my daughter Emily unwrapped a second-hand doll. The birthday dinner where they forgot to even mention Noah's name, too busy cooing over Claire's youngest, Max. The time I was hospitalized for 3 days after surgery, and no one visited, but they flew across the country when Claire caught the flu. Had always been there. I had just been too loyal, too hopeful, too desperate to be seen. You see, when you grow up being the one who has it together, people start believing you don't need anything. Not attention, not affection, not love. But strong doesn't mean invincible. And silent doesn't mean okay. That morning, something shifted inside me. I looked at Claire, scrolling through her phone like none of this mattered, and I felt the weight of years of being the afterthought. I realized that in this family, love wasn't unconditional. It was convenient, selective, transactional. And here's a hard truth many of us learn too late. Just because someone is family doesn't mean they treat you with care. And just because you've always been the one to forgive, doesn't mean you always have to be. It took me 35 years to realize I was fighting for a seat at a table that had already decided who belonged. But the realization itself, it was freeing. Painful, yes, but freeing. Because once you stop chasing approval from people who won't give it, you finally make room to love yourself without apology. As I stood there gripping my suitcase, my parents chatting like nothing had happened, I knew something had changed. They had made their choice. Now it was time for me to make mine. I didn't make some big dramatic scene at the airport. There was no yelling, no tears, no suitcase flinging moment like in the movies. Just silence. And then, a decision. I looked at my boarding pass. Smooth, crisp, and full of promises. Getaway. Break. Chance to breathe. And then I looked at my family. Laughing, chatting, completely oblivious to the storm that was brewing inside me. I thought about my children. Emily with her wild curls and endless questions. And Noah, who still reached for my hand when he was scared. They were at home, missing their mother. Meanwhile, my parents had rolled out the red carpet for Claire and her children. Without a single explanation. They hadn't forgotten my kids. They had excluded them. On purpose. And here's the thing no one tells you about betrayal from family. It doesn't always scream. Sometimes it whispers in choices they make. In who gets invited, who gets listened to, and who gets left behind. That morning I realized I had two choices. Could stay. Smile through the pain. Pretend it didn't matter. Play the role of the reasonable daughter like I always had. Or I could do something I had never dared to do before. Stand up for myself. It was terrifying. But something inside me had cracked wide open. And once you finally see things clearly, you can't unsee them. So I took a deep breath, gripped the handle of my suitcase, and turned away from the boarding gate. Enjoy your vacation, I said, my voice steady and quiet but firm. Then I walked, past the security lines, past the duty-free shops, past the future they had imagined for me. I walked toward something unknown, but for the first time it felt like it was mine. Here's the truth I learned in that moment. Sometimes, choosing yourself means disappointing people who never truly saw you anyway. And that's okay, because peace is worth more than their approval. As I drove home in silence, the city passing in a blur outside my window, a new kind of clarity settled in. This wasn't just about a ruined trip. It was about every moment that came before it. And I knew what I had to do next. Not just for me but for my children. It was time to stop waiting for their love, and start building a life without it. The drive home felt longer than it should have. Maybe it was the weight of the silence. Or maybe it was the ache in my chest that came from realizing I wasn't just leaving a trip behind. I was leaving a part of my old life too. When I finally pulled into my driveway, the porch light was still on. Through the window I saw Sarah, my best friend, sitting at the kitchen table, flipping through a magazine while keeping an eye on my little ones. I opened the door and before I could even take off my shoes, two tiny bodies came flying toward me. "Mommy!" Emily squealed, throwing her arms around my waist. "You're back," Noah said, clinging to my leg like his life depended on it. And just like that, I remembered why I left. I held them close, burying my face in their hair, breathing them in like oxygen. They were my home. Not that gate, not that flight, not that family. That night, after Sarah left and the kids were tucked in bed, I sat alone at the kitchen table. The glow from the overhead light pooled around my phone, which had been buzzing all evening. Missed calls, texts, voicemails. Mom had called 4 times. Dad twice. Claire not once. I didn't listen to the voicemails. I didn't need to. because whatever they were going to say, it didn't matter anymore. Instead, I opened the family group chat, the same one where Claire's kids were always the stars of the show, while mine were barely acknowledged, and I started typing. I won't be coming on the trip. And I won't be part of this family anymore either. I've spent my life feeling like I was less, like my children were less. Today you made it clear that nothing is going to change. So I'm done. Don't call me. Don't text me. And don't expect anything from me ever again. I stared at the message for a moment, heart pounding, and then I hit send. I watched as the little delivered notification appeared, and then slowly I left the chat. One by one I blocked each number. It was quiet after that. No more buzzing. No more guilt. Just silence. And for the first time in years, it felt like peace. Here's the thing about cutting the cord. Doesn't mean you don't love them. It just means you've finally started loving yourself enough to stop accepting less. We're taught that family is everything, that we should forgive, forget, endure. But what they don't teach us is this. Family doesn't get a free pass to hurt you just because you share a last name. I didn't walk away out of anger. I walked away out of clarity. And out of love for myself, and for the two little hearts sleeping peacefully in the next room. Before we move on, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever had to make a decision like this? One that others might not understand, but deep down you knew was right for your soul? Let me know in the comments. Your story might help someone else find their voice too. Before we continue, I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever felt like the less important one in your own family? Maybe you were the one who always tried to keep the peace. The one who was always there but somehow still invisible. Share your thoughts in the comments below. Was Jessica right to walk away? Have you ever had to make a hard choice like that, for your own peace? Your stories, your voice, it matters. Let's support each other in the comments. First, there was silence. Not a sound. Not a message. Not a single word. A whole day passed after I sent that final message and left the family group chat. I thought maybe they hadn't seen it yet. Or maybe they were just too stunned to respond. But the truth, they were waiting. Waiting for me to cave. Waiting for me to come crawling back like I always had. I didn't. By the second day the calls started. Mom tried 4 times in one afternoon. Then Dad. Then again, silence. On the third day, the messages came. Carefully crafted words designed to pull at my guilt. Jessica, let's be reasonable. You're being dramatic. We didn't mean it like that. Don't throw away your family over one little misunderstanding. Not a single "I'm sorry." Not a single word about how they hurt me. Just excuses, justifications, dismissal. And then Claire chimed in, of course. Seriously, Jess. Grow up. That one stung not because it was unexpected but because it confirmed everything I already knew. She didn't see me. She never had. She saw me as dramatic, sensitive, disposable. But I stayed quiet. I didn't reply. I didn't explain. Because here's what I've learned. When you stop reacting to manipulation, it loses its power. And silence, when it comes from a place of peace, not fear, is one of the strongest responses you can give. But on the 4th day, the tone changed. It wasn't about hurt feelings anymore. It was about something else. Jessica, your father and I need to talk. We're in a bit of a financial situation. You've always been the responsible one. We could really use your help. There it was. The truth behind their sudden concern. It wasn't me they missed. It was my support, my stability, my willingness to pick up the pieces they dropped. I sat with that realization for a long time. All those years I'd helped them pay off bills, fix broken things, lend money when they overspent. Never once did they ask how I was holding up after my divorce. Never once did they offer help when I was working 2 jobs and raising 2 kids alone. It was never about love. It was about what I could give. That kind of love isn't love at all. It's transactional. And the moment I stopped giving, they stopped pretending. That night, I tucked Emily into bed, brushing the curls away from her eyes. She looked up at me sleepily and said, "Mommy, I like it when you smile more now." I kissed her forehead, heart full and aching all at once. I knew then that I had made the right choice. Not just for me but for them. They deserved a mom who wasn't constantly chasing people who didn't care. Here's the lesson I wish someone had told me sooner. Sometimes the silence after you set a boundary isn't loneliness. It's clarity. It's the sound of finally hearing your own voice. And as I sat in the quiet of my home that night, the kids peacefully asleep, a different memory surfaced. One that had nothing to do with my parents, but everything to do with the way I had learned to accept less than I deserved. Because this wasn't the first time I had felt unseen. The truth was, I'd lived through this once before, with someone I thought I'd spend forever with. It's strange how life connects the dots for you. How one heartbreak can quietly lead you back to another. That night, after the texts stopped and the silence finally settled in, I found myself thinking about someone I hadn't thought of in a while. Jason. My ex-husband. We met when I was 24. It was fast, intense, full of late-night talks and promises whispered across pillowcases. Back then I believed in fairy tales. I believed that if you gave someone your all, they'd give theirs in return. We got married a year later. I wore a simple white dress, barefoot on the beach. Jason cried during our vows. Everyone said we were perfect, but life has a way of revealing people slowly. And the truth was, Jason didn't want to be a husband. Not really. He liked the idea of being in love but not the work that came after. When I got pregnant with Emily, he celebrated by buying himself a new motorcycle. When Noah was born, he barely looked up from his phone. And when I needed him most, when I was exhausted and lonely and scared, he always seemed to be somewhere else. I used to sit on the kitchen floor late at night, the baby monitor buzzing beside me, and wonder, is it supposed to feel this empty? Kept trying. I read books, cooked dinners he never ate, said yes when I wanted to say no. Because that's what we're taught, right? That if something breaks, you fix it, even if you're the only one trying. But one day, while holding Noah in one arm and stirring pasta with the other, Jason looked at me and said, Jess, I don't think I can do this anymore. There was no yelling, no dramatic betrayal, just a quiet exit from a life he never really wanted to begin with. And in a way, that hurt even more. Because it confirmed something I had feared deep down. I was always loving people who didn't know how to love me back. People who only showed up when it was easy, when I was useful, when they needed something. Sound familiar? That night, sitting alone with the echoes of my family's silence and Jason's old words still lingering in my mind, I realized something. This wasn't about my parents, or about Jason. It was about me. I had spent most of my adult life trying to earn love from people who should have given it freely. And maybe that's the hardest truth to swallow, but also the most freeing. Because once you see the pattern, you get to break it. Here's the lesson I carried with me that night. You don't have to keep proving your worth to people who refuse to see it. Sometimes walking away isn't giving up. It's growing up. And just when I thought I had closed every door from my past, life knocked on one of them again. But this time it wasn't to pull me back in. It was to show me just how far I'd come. It happened on a Tuesday evening, just as I was putting the dishes away. My phone buzzed. I glanced at the screen, expecting another spam call or a reminder I'd forgotten to cancel. But then I saw the name, Jason. I hesitated. We didn't talk much. Not unless it had to do with the kids. Co-parenting had become a quiet, structured exchange of emails and short texts, drop-off times, school notes, allergy lists. But a call, out of the blue, answered. Hey, he said, voice low and unsure. I heard what happened. I didn't say anything at first. He cleared his throat. Your mom called me. Course she did. She said you've been acting out, that you're upsetting the family and they're worried about you. I let out a soft, dry laugh. Of course she made herself the victim. There was a pause. And then, something I didn't expect. I told her to leave me out of it, Jason said. Told her that whatever happened, it's not my business. But that you're a good mom. And they should be lucky you're still even talking to them at all. For a moment, I didn't know what to say. Jason had never defended me before. Not during our marriage, not when I cried in silence, not even when I begged him to be present for our kids. But here he was, quietly, unexpectedly, choosing honesty over convenience. It wasn't a grand gesture. It didn't change the past. But somehow it mattered. Because it wasn't about him agreeing with me. It was about someone finally acknowledging that I wasn't crazy. That what I had endured, at home, in marriage, in family, was real. We talked for a few more minutes. Nothing deep. Nothing dramatic. But when the call ended, I stared at my phone for a while, and something in me settled. Sometimes closure doesn't come with apologies. Sometimes it comes with clarity. And here's what I took from that conversation. Healing doesn't always require reconciliation. Sometimes it just needs recognition. That moment with Jason wasn't a bridge being rebuilt. It was a door quietly closing with peace. I wasn't waiting for validation anymore. Not from him. Not from my parents. Not from anyone. But just as I was starting to find my footing again, another challenge came. One I wasn't quite prepared for. Because while I could walk away from toxic adults, how do you explain that kind of hurt to children who still believe love is simple? Few days passed. The air in the house felt lighter, quieter even, like something heavy had been lifted. I was slowly learning how to breathe again. Then one evening, just as I was stirring pasta on the stove, Emily padded into the kitchen in her bunny slippers, dragging her favorite stuffed rabbit behind her. "Mommy," she asked, tilting her head, "when are we going to Grandma and Grandpa's house again?" I froze, my wooden spoon suspended in midair. Before I could answer, Noah looked up from the kitchen table. "Yeah," he chimed in. "We haven't seen them in a long time." There it was. The question I'd been dreading. Not because I didn't have an answer, but because the truth was too complicated for their little hearts. How do you explain favoritism to a 5-year-old? How do you say, "They didn't want you there," without breaking something sacred? I set the spoon down, walked over, and knelt to their level. "Sweethearts," I began gently, brushing a curl from Emily's cheek. "We're not going to see Grandma and Grandpa for a while." "Why not?" she asked, wide-eyed. Took a breath. "Because sometimes, people, even family, don't treat us the way we deserve. And when that happens, we have to make choices to protect our hearts." Emily thought about it for a moment, then nodded slowly, like she understood in her own way. "Okay," she said softly, then hugged her bunny close and skipped back toward the living room. Noah lingered a little longer. He wrapped his arms around my neck and whispered, "I still love them." My heart clenched. "I know," I said, holding him close. "And that's a beautiful thing. But loving someone doesn't mean we let them hurt us. That's something Mommy's learning too." That night, as I tucked them into bed and kissed their foreheads, I realized something. They weren't confused. They weren't angry. They just needed honesty delivered with softness. Sometimes we underestimate how deeply children understand. But the truth is, when we model healthy boundaries, they learn how to set their own someday. And that's one of the greatest gifts we can give them. Just when I thought the dust had settled, there was a knock at my door. And when I peeked through the window, I saw a face I hadn't expected. Not my parents, Claire. And with her came one final test of everything I had learned. It was a quiet Sunday afternoon. The kids were building a pillow fort in the living room, and I was finally sipping a cup of tea that hadn't gone cold. Not perfect, not easy, but real. Then came the knock. It was firm. Familiar. I wasn't expecting anyone. My stomach tightened a little as I peeked through the front window. And there she was, Claire. She stood on the porch like she belonged there, like this was just another casual drop-in. I opened the door but didn't step aside. "What do you want, Claire?" She gave a soft sigh, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "Wow. No hello." I raised an eyebrow. "You didn't come for small talk." She looked me over, almost like she was trying to figure out which version of me she was dealing with. The Jessica who used to bite her tongue, or the one who finally stopped. "I came to talk about Mom and Dad," she said. There's nothing to talk about, I replied calmly. Claire rolled her eyes. You made your point, okay? You're mad. But it's been months. They're still our parents, Jess. I smiled, but it didn't reach my eyes. No, Claire. They were our parents, until they made it crystal clear who mattered more. She hesitated, like she hadn't expected me to stand that firm. Oh, come on, she huffed. They love you. You just take things too seriously. I felt that old familiar sting rising in my chest, the one I'd pushed down for years. But this time I didn't let it silence me. No, I said softly. They love what I give, not who I am. There's a difference. Claire opened her mouth to respond, but I raised a hand gently. I'm not angry anymore. I'm not even hurt. I'm just done. The words surprised even me with how peaceful they felt. You can keep pretending everything's fine, I continued. But I won't. I won't teach my kids that love is something you have to beg for. I won't show them that silence is strength when it really comes from fear. She didn't speak. Maybe she didn't know what to say. Maybe somewhere deep down she knew I was right. There was a flicker of something in her eyes. Regret, maybe. Or just discomfort. But I didn't need her validation anymore. Goodbye, Claire, I said gently. And I closed the door. I didn't slam it. I didn't lock it dramatically. I just closed it. That night, as the kids played and laughter echoed through the house, I curled up on the couch with my tea and a blanket, finally warm in more ways than one. Sarah, my best friend, dropped by with cookies. As she settled into the armchair, she raised an eyebrow. So, your sister showed up? Yep, I said, smiling. Let me guess, she wanted you to forgive and forget, and move on like nothing happened. Pretty much. And I told her to leave. Sarah grinned. Damn right you did. We clinked mugs. And for the first time in a very long time, felt free. No more proving. No more explaining. No more begging to belong. I had my kids. Had my peace. And that was more than enough. Thank you for walking this journey with me. If this story stirred something in you, if it reminded you of your own strength or someone you love, stay with me for just a moment more. Let's talk about the lesson behind all of this, and how it might just help someone else feel a little less alone. Thank you so much for staying with Jessica's story until the very end. Sometimes the hardest thing isn't walking away from toxic people. It's realizing that the ones hurting you might be the very people who raised you. But here's the truth. You are allowed to protect your peace. You are allowed to choose love that doesn't come with conditions. And you are allowed to create a new kind of family, one built on respect, kindness, and genuine care. Now it's your turn. Tell me in the comments, what did this story make you feel? Have you ever had to let go of someone you loved for the sake of your own healing? Let's talk about it. I read every comment, and I'd love to hear your heart. And if this story touched you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more heartfelt stories just like this one. Until next time, take care of your heart and remember, you deserve to be loved fully just as you are.